Spirit and the Great One, top of the stretch. Life is Good, 4-length lead. Now it's 5, and it's all Life is Good. He's passing this test with flying colors. Life is Good, unbeaten and untested as he romps in the San Felipe. Wins by about 8.
Welcome back to this week's edition of Kentucky Derby Power 5 here on Racing Rundown. Today we're going to be recapping the races from Saturday, March 6th. We got 3 Kentucky Derby prep races that we're going to be pulling the top 5 from this weekend from. And we're also going to be updating our overall top 5 for the 2021 Kentucky Derby at the end of the video. But we're going to start off with the top 5 runners from this weekend, and we're going to get right into it with number 5, and that is Medina Spirit, coming out of a second place finish in the San Felipe. He was well beaten by Life is Good, who we will definitely be talking about in a few moments, but he was well beaten in there. A lot of people are going to be talking about the ride that Medina Spirit had in this race, but at the end of the day, it was a little bit wide at points in the race, and it did wind up, he was third at one point in the stretch, only by a head though, but looked like a little bit like he may drop out and finish third in the race, but did wind up finishing, I don't want to say a strong second place finish, but it was a good enough second place finish considering he had been beaten by 8 lengths. This is clearly the horse that is going to be the 1A for Bob Baffert at Santa Anita. He has horses like that pretty much every single year. He has multiple horses running in these races on the West Coast, and this is going to be who is the 1A horse, Medina Spirit. He's probably going to run another second in the Santa Anita Derby and get into the Kentucky Derby. He's got 30 points right now. All he needs to do is to run 34 points, but all he needs to do is to run a 4th place finish and get in, and it looks very likely he will be in the starting gate. So he's one that you can bank on for the Kentucky Derby, and he's number 5 on our list from this past weekend's performers.
And at number 4, we have the runner-up from the Tampa Bay Derby. That's Hidden Stash. This horse, coming off the turn, looked like he was about to breeze by the ultimate winner and win this race for fun and grab 50 points for the Derby, but he kind of just hung in the stretch, or at least he was either that and a combination of the other horse re-rallying really nicely, but still a very, very solid second for Hidden Stash, closing at Tampa, which is not always the easiest thing to do. The pace was certainly there for him, but it was a very good run. This horse has been very consistent throughout his career. He had 2 wins to close off his 2-year-old campaign, then came back with a 3rd in the Sam Davis, and then that 2nd in the Tampa Bay Derby. He's continuing to accumulate the points, and next they've announced the Bluegrass will probably be the next target to hopefully put him over the edge and get him into the Derby starting gate. He's got a 1.25 mile pedigree. The more distance, the better, so it'll be nice to see him get that extra 16th of a mile that he's been missing from his last 2 races and get it at Keeneland in the Bluegrass. In Keeneland, it's not always the most friendly track to close on, but if you have the right pace, he certainly will be at an advantage. So once again, that's something you should look for with this horse. He's got a really good closing kick, and he's gotten 2 wins up in Kentucky, 1 at Keeneland and 1 at Churchill Downs. So going forward on the trail, he's going to be running in familiar places. So if he's going to a track that he's won at before, which is a plus for his final prep, and should he be able to make it into the Derby, he has a win over that track too. So lots of positives with this horse. A little concerning, he was a little green coming down the lane and not finishing the job off in the Tampa Derby, but I still think he's a very solid horse.
And now we're going to move on to the number 3 horse, which is actually the horse who won the Tampa Bay Derby, Helium, who is similarly reminiscent to last year's winner of the Tampa Bay Derby, King Guillermo. A little bit of a similar circumstance with him, not the massive price that we got with King Guillermo in last year's Tampa Bay Derby, but this is a horse who was coming out of a stake that was not on the dirt and off of a very long layoff. He was coming off a longer layoff than King Guillermo was, but still very impressive. This was Helium's first start on the dirt, and it was his first start since October, so a pretty substantial layoff for him to come off of that. And also, as Eric highlighted, he did have to take the challenge of Hidden Stash, and this is a horse who had to come from even further back, for talking about from where he was at the beginning of the race, than Hidden Stash was. Now, he closed up a lot quicker than Hidden Stash did, but still, a horse who had to close as well, and those points that Eric made about closing at Tampa apply also to Helium in here. And once Helium got to the stretch, as Eric mentioned, it looked like that Hidden Stash was going to go by, but Helium was able to dig in, so that's very impressive for a horse to be able to come off of a layoff that's that long, and then be able to take the challenge from Hidden Stash and turn him away, and wound up winning by just under a length. So that was I thought it was a very impressive performance. If we're ranking, I don't want to spoil the Gotham, or who we're going to have in second, but it's apparent that it's going to be the Gotham winner, Weyburn. And I would say of the two performances, at least in my opinion, I don't know if Eric would agree with me on this, but I think that this, as a singular performance, was the better of the two races between the Tampa Bay Derby and the Gotham. But the thing for us that put Helium at 3 is the fact that he is going to be resting between now and the Kentucky Derby. So he's going to be coming off of a layoff in the Kentucky Derby, which, has worked to a degree in the past. Todd Pletcher did it with Destin in 2016. Destin didn't run terrible, but at the same time, this horse is coming off of one race between October and May, so that kind of deflates the stock a little bit. But just purely based on the win, this is a very impressive win for him and a deserved number 3 spot on this list.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing that kind of put Weyburn at number 2 for us was the fact was the pedigree. The pedigree for Helium, very turfy. Distance is, the questions are not fully answered for Weyburn. It's the exact opposite. His pedigree suggests he's going to run for days. Weyburn, this was a huge upset. He was 46-1 when he won the Gotham here. He's never been a bad horse. He was running in New York, broke his maiden on Cigar Mile Day, but he hadn't ran since then, which is why a lot of people were really not looking at him as a high-level contender in this spot, especially given the Chad Brown duo and the Bob Baffert horse, and the other horses that were in the low teens, Capo Cane and wiped the slate. So there were tons of reason for him to be at this price. The layoff and the competition, but he still pulled it off. It was a very impressive week and really dug down. He got passed by Crowded Trade. Heading into the stretch, looked like Crowded Trade for Chad Brown was going to run off with this one, and he battled right on back and put his nose down in front, got himself 50 points. So he's in the Derby starting gate. They said that the Wood Memorial will certainly be next for him. And going back to the pedigree, by Pioneer of the Nile, we of course know that the distance is there for him. Pioneer of the Nile, second in the Derby himself. His son is Triple Crown winner. One of his sons is Triple Crown winner, American Pharoah. And then the Dam side, Dam, actually her best offspring, oddly enough, was a really good sprinter in Canada named Yorkton. But a bunch of her other babies have been really good. States placed, going 2 turns up in Canada. She herself by APND out of a Sunday Silence mare. So distance through the roof for Weyburn, which is incredible considering the fact that you haven't even seen him go 2 turns. That certainly gives him a lot of upside in my eyes. So it'll be really nice to see him stretch out and see what he can do there. And certainly enough to be second on our list this week.
And the number 1 horse, this was going to be pretty obvious considering the runners this weekend. Now, Life is Good for Bob Baffert. There's really not much more that you can say about Life is Good that hasn't already been said about him. He's 3 for 3. He's following the authentic progression. Right now, he is going to be going on to the Santa Anita Derby. There are some questions that are left with Life is Good. There was, he didn't really have to take much of a challenge, but at the end of the day, he drew off and won by 8 lengths in the San Felipe. He was a little bit green. That's the one big concern for him, is that he's going to have to fix that. He was drifting in the stretch. He's going to have to fix that in terms of getting to the Kentucky Derby, but he's going to have another race to fix that. I imagine Bob Baffert is going to try some things to get him to be able to correct that situation. But in terms of, him being able to win these kind of races, I don't want to say that the distance question mark is answered, but I said this to Eric, and I made this observation about him. I don't want to say that he can get the 1.25 miles, but I also don't want to say that he can't. So we're obviously going to have to judge him when he gets there. Absolutely believe he'll be able to handle the 1 1/8 just fine. A lot of the big names that were non-Bob Baffert horses from the Santa Anita area are going to be moving on to other prep races outside of Santa Anita. So that really shows that a lot of people are afraid of Life is Good and don't think they can beat him, but that also does lighten up the competition for him. So really no doubts that he'll be able to get a win in the Santa Anita Derby and move on to the Kentucky Derby, which is where we're assuming that the eventual progression for him is going to be. So that's it for the top 5 from this past weekend. Getting into the overall top 5, we did throw in some changes in here. And these are 2 horses that we haven't included in the overall top 5 yet. And they haven't run since. But we were a little discouraged about the run that Medina Spirit had. Yeah, he was second, but he was very much well beaten. We had him number 5 on this list. And last weekend he was number 4. So we didn't want to have him ranked number 4 overall or number 5 overall when he was worse than on our rankings from this past weekend, than a couple other horses who were not going to be ranking the overall top 5. So we bumped him out. We also bumped out Keep Me in Mind because he does have some pretty significant questions going into his race this weekend in the Rebel. Keep Me in Mind could very easily jump right back into this position. But right now, we're going to switch it up with 2 horses we haven't used yet. And number 5 is going to be Concert Tour, who was 2 for 2, won the San Vicente last start out. He's going to be going into the Rebel. He's going to be one of, if not the favorite horse in that race. Imagine that he's going to run a really strong effort. So he's number 5. Mandaloon, the winner of the Risen Star Stakes, is going to be number 4 on our list. So those are the 2 horses that we haven't that we haven't included on the list. Mandaloon looks like he's going to be very strong going into the Louisiana Derby. So those 2 horses in there, and then the same top 3 from last week. Life is Good, Greatest Honor, Essential Quality. The reason that Life is Good doesn't jump up to number 2 or number 1 with us is because Essential Quality and Greatest Honor have been tested in some way before. Greatest Honor, obviously in the Fountain of Youth, was very tested. Had to run down a horse, drain the clock, who looked like he was home free at points in the stretch, and had to come from pretty far back at Gulfstream. Looked like he was beaten on the far turn. And Essential Quality, even though he wasn't tested in the Southwest, he was a horse who did have to close in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. That was a race where I would say he was sufficiently tested for me to know that he is able to take a challenge in there. Life is Good hasn't had to take a challenge yet. Therefore, we're going to put the 2 winners from the past weekend, Essential Quality and Greatest Honor, above him. So the top 5: Essential Quality, Greatest Honor, Life is Good, Mandaloon, and Concert Tour. And with that, that's it for this week's edition of Kentucky Derby Power 5. We'll be back next weekend when we break down the Rebel Stakes. Have a good one.